Welcome back to another Tech 360 video, guys. So today, the purpose of this video is we're going to take a look at the EOS R3 by Canon. And we are here at East Coast Park behind some water sparks because there's a very specific reason for us to be here to shoot. This camera is made for professional sports and photojournalism, so what a better way to showcase this camera than to shoot some people just doing some water sports. But before I go into an in-depth review of the camera, I just want to give you guys a brief overview of what I've been using this camera for. So I've had this camera for about 3 weeks now. Shout out to Canon for sending this camera out to me, as well as all the other lenses that came along with it. I was doing a shoot for behind the scenes photographer for a Mobile Legends competition. It was a World Championship tournament held here in Singapore over the weekend, and I had the pleasure of using this camera while I shoot. I have to say, it is not a beginner camera to use, and the reason for that is because the body alone costs $8,749. So unless you have that lying around, I would say this is not a camera to pick up just for a hobby, but definitely targeted towards more professional users. But right off the bat, 24.1 megapixels and loads of functions that come along with this camera, which I will touch on in a bit. So before that, we will talk a little bit about the design of this beautiful camera. Okay, so for the body, just looking at this camera, it is very beefy. It's not your typical DSLR or mirrorless camera. And what I like about the EOS R3 is that, much like the 1DX3, you actually have a landscape grip as well as a portrait grip. So for people that like to shoot with different compositions all the time, this comes in really handy, like myself when I do Instagram photography where it's always 4x5 crop. But other than that, the body, even though it looks very chunky, it weighs 822 grams, which is 34% lighter than the 1DX Mark III. So the 1DX Mark III weighs around 1.2 kilograms. So this is actually almost 500 grams lighter. That is crazy just to think about it. In terms of body, you have, like I mentioned, 2 grip. You have all your buttons that you would expect. And I would say like the R3 actually has loads of buttons, and there's quite a number of reasons for that. Because when you're shooting sports photography or event photography, you need to be able to change settings and functions on the go. And I am very happy to say that everything is within the control of your thumb, which I'll go through a little bit more in a bit. But other than that, it uses a full frame CMOS sensor, 24.1 megapixels. And I know what you're thinking. A lot of people like myself was looking forward to the R3 to be perhaps maybe 30, 40 or even 50 megapixels. But I have to say that after using it for 3 weeks, there's quite a number of reasons why 24 megapixels is actually not that bad. So Canon did mention to me that even though this camera is 24 megapixels, in terms of resolution, it can be quite comparable to a 5D Mark IV, which has 30.1 megapixels. And fortunately for me, I personally own a 5D Mark IV. So during the real world test later, we'll be testing out and putting these 2 cameras up to the test, shooting similar images, and I'll let you guys decide if the 24.1 megapixel frame sensor on the R3 is actually better than a 5D Mark IV. But other than that, body, you have a fully articulating 3.2 LCD touchscreen. Let's talk about card slots. EOS R3 has quite an interesting combination. You have dual card slots, but both of them are different. So you have one CF Express Type B card slot as well as a UHS 2 SD card slot. In terms of battery, this battery is really big. It's quite a chunky one. So if you're familiar with the 1DX series, this is actually a similar battery to the 1DX3. So it's the Canon LPE19. And the CPAR rating for this battery is actually rated up to only 860 shots. But I have to say, having shot this for as a BTS photographer for the M3 World Tournament, I have shoots for up to like maybe 8 to 12 hours, and actually throughout the later days, I was very confident not to bring a secondary body. The capacity is just so large. CPAR rating 860 shots, but I did up to, I would say, 2,500 shots shooting compressed, shooting uncompressed RAW and JPEG simultaneously, and at the end of the day, I would still have 25% of battery left, and that just goes to say how well this battery is made for this camera. So perfect for anyone that wants to just bring a single camera out to shoot throughout the day. But other than that, I would say the ports, you have your mic port, your headphone jack, you have your USB-C as well as micro HDMI, and all the other regular ports that you expect of a professional camera. One thing to note is that the EVF on this is probably the largest that I've ever seen on any camera out there, and there's quite a number of reasons for that. It's because that this EVF actually houses the eye control autofocusing system for the EOS R3. So before we touch a little bit about the autofocusing system, one thing I wanted to mention is that because the R3 is made for sports photography, so definitely autofocusing has to be, is a must, especially accurate autofocusing. And the R3 has a number of new autofocusing flexible zones, which they call it in the camera. So what it basically means is that you can specifically choose a different area points, and these shapes are quite interesting. You can choose one that is elongated horizontally as well as vertically. So these are very dedicated for people that want to shoot very specific kinds of subjects, and perhaps you'll be able to try them out today. But without further ado, let's jump into the features and specs of this R3 because there is a lot to cover. Okay, before I touch on the features and specs of the R3, I just want to point out that for a camera that costs $8,749, obviously there's a lot of features and specs put into the camera body alone. So for the sake of this video, I'm not going to be able to talk about everything, but I will be highlighting on the key features that I felt really stood out to me during my 3 weeks of using the camera. So the thing that I want to touch on most is autofocusing. Autofocusing. This camera does so well when it comes to shooting fast-moving objects. So today we are at the water park in East Coast Park, so we're going to put that out to the test. But before we do that, I just want to mention that for the autofocusing system, you have subject tracking, human, animal, as well as vehicle tracking, and they all have eye as well as head and body focusing system that's built in it. So when you're shooting even people on a motorbike with a helmet, that's going to do very well with this. And another cool feature about the R3 is the eye control AF, which is this new technology that is put into the R3 that I haven't seen in any other cameras out there. So what is eye control AF? It's really cool. So let me just try to explain as simple as I can. All you have to do is basically turn it on, put your eye through the electronic viewfinder, and where your eyeball is looking around, there will be an orange circle or whatever color that you want to set it to in the menu. The camera will recognize where you're looking at, and as long as you half press it, it would lock onto that. So just mentioning about this feature, you can see, I can see how this would be very, very handy for people that are doing sports photography when they don't want to fiddle around with their autofocusing that much with their fingers. And it would be so cool just to look around at where you want, half press, and it will lock onto that point. But that being said, obviously you have to calibrate it, and the calibrating system is quite interesting. All you have to do is just look through the viewfinder and there'll be points that come up during the frame, and you just have to look at them and it will calibrate it to your eyes. So my personal opinions about the eye control AF. I do actually have mixed feelings about it because I've actually seen reviews of people using it online, and they found it absolutely accurate and stunning, and it was really perfect for them. But for me, I'm not sure if it was just this particular R3 that I have, or maybe it's just a firmware that hasn't been updated yet. But when I'm using it, the camera actually does track my eye, but it's not exactly accurate. And what I mean by that is, when, let's say I'm looking at the corner of the frame, the circle does move to that frame, that part of the frame, but it flickers around quite a bit. And I found it quite inaccurate at times, and especially when I was shooting the M3 World Championship, I feel like I didn't want to rely on that as much, and it made me feel less confident about the autofocusing within the camera. So if you're planning to purchase the camera, I definitely do recommend you trying it out before you purchase it if you're interested in the eye control AF. But obviously, it is actually a very fun feature to use, and not one I would turn down if I was using the R3. Okay, so if you're looking at this and you're quite curious what's going on, let me just explain. So we don't have a recorder to record the screen internally, so we have this makeshift setup so you guys can see the autofocusing point tracking. So let's just look at the screen and I'll just explain what's going on. So briefly, I was mentioning the different areas that you can choose from, so there's actually a wide variety, and this is the flexible zones are the ones that I felt were really interesting that I haven't seen in other cameras yet. So for example, flexible zone AF2, this autofocusing area is, if you can look at the screen clearly, it's just a wide vertical box around. And then for the next mode, it's actually horizontal and it's very narrow. So for specific types of photography like this one, where I only know that I want to focus on maybe, let's say, the middle area, I can just half press and the camera will recognize to look for something that is the subject that's moving within this box. But let's not do that. Let's try this one. Okay, so now we're just gonna be testing and seeing if the camera will be able to accurately track the moving subjects that are doing the water sports. So I'm using the 7200, so let's go ahead and track someone. Okay, cool, we tracked this particular person. As you can see on the screen, there's actually a blue box around that person before the white color board interfered with the frame. But you can see, I mean, like the guys on the wave boards are not exactly moving very quickly as well, and they're quite a distance away. Can't seem to find anybody that's closer to us, but let's just zoom in to see how well it does at 200 mm. Okay, let's catch this guy. There we go. So even though the guy is wearing a helmet, the camera recognizes its body as well as its helmet. It switches between both. And yeah, I would say it tracked the dude all the way to the corner. Let's see if it comes back around. Yeah, I would say it does actually really accurate. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that I am using the human subject tracking mode now, so it'll try to recognize human priority within the frame and it will track that particular subject. So this dude again is just recognizing, the camera is recognizing that it's a moving body, so it's tracking the subject, and I'm half pressing the camera. Alright, so we're gonna be testing the burst rate now on this camera. So like I mentioned before, it's rated to do 30 shots per second if you're using the electronic shutter. And let's go into the menu systems just to check if I'm on the right setting. Okay, drive mode. So here are the various drive modes that you can use. So I'm going to select High Speed Continuous Plus, which is the highest setting available. And I just have to make sure that my shutter mode is on electronic, because if you're using electronic first curtain, you're only going to get 15 shots per second roughly, and it's the same for mechanical. So let's select electronic so we can get the fastest readout available. And all I have to do now is try to find someone that might be jumping. I think we got someone right here. Oh, nope, it's not. Okay, we're going to have to be patient to see if someone is going to be jumping on this board. So I'm going to capture him right here. Okay, I think I see someone coming. Nope, not again. Yes, yes, yes! Woo! Nice. Okay, let's just review those shots real quick. That's a lot of shots. I was holding it down for about, I would say, 3 seconds. So this is what 30 shots per second look like. And I guess with this many amount of shots, you can, when you're shooting like really high speed subjects, you can really have the flexibility of choosing and selecting a particular frame once you're done shooting, which I feel is the real benefit of using the R3. Especially if you're shooting like sports like soccer, where you have to use a really long lens, and on top of the auto-focusing system and how accurate it is, it can track onto the subjects moving around a lot erratically, as well as being able to capture the perfect moment that you want if you're shooting at such a high burst rate. So I mentioned a lot of functions about the R3 photo functions, but let's not forget about the video, because this camera is packed with a lot of really cool video functions as well. So just off the top of my head, 6K 12-bit RAW, 4K 120 frames per second, but here in Singapore we're going to use PAL, so there will be 100 frames per second. And you can have the ability to even shoot on lock. And the R3 only has C-Lock 3, unlike the R5, which has C-Lock standard as well as C-Lock 3. So the R3 shoots on standard color profile as well as C-Lock 3, and we will take a look at that in a bit. But before that, let's just look into the menu system so I can show you guys how to select the high frame rates for shooting on 4K as well as 100 frames. So I'm just gonna go into my settings right here, and under the first tab, you can see high frame rate. I'm just gonna enable that. And if you go into the movie recording size, you can now select 4K D, 4K U, and it's 100 frames per second. So let's just shoot this at the highest, largest possible resolution and see what that's like. Okay, so if I'm shooting at 100 frames per second, which means I need to keep my shutter at 1/200 of a second, and it's an extremely bright day out. If I'm not wrong, I am on ISO 800 because the native ISO for C-Log is actually at 800. Let me see if I can switch deck. Okay, let's just shoot on standard color profile. Okay, so now I can adjust my ISO. I'm just gonna keep it at 400. Alright, I think I got this guy. Okay, I'm just gonna hit roll. Nice. Okay. I don't think it reviews in slow-mo though. Oh, it does. This is the exact clip that I just shot. And man, that looks so smooth and so nice. You can see the motion and of the water and her trying to go up this ramp. Beautiful. Yeah, having this function is really handy for me because I like to shoot a lot of slow-mo, so you can just slow it down in post. And come on guys, slow-mo just looks so much cooler, especially when you're doing fast-moving spots such as whatever we're shooting today. So the R3 actually is able to shoot up to 6K RAW 12-bit, and the frame rate goes up to 50 frames per second, which is quite interesting because on the R5 you can shoot 8K RAW 12-bit as well. So 8K and 6K, the R3 6K, the R5 8K. But the benefit of shooting on the R3 is that you have the option of choosing to shoot 6K 12-bit RAW at 50 frames per second. So what that means is that you have the ability to slow it down half a speed in post. Unlike the R5, you can shoot 8K 12-bit RAW, but it's only 25 or 24 frames per second. So I'm just going to show you guys in the menu system how you are able to access the 6K RAW. So under the menu settings, under movie recording format on the first tab, you can either choose to shoot MP4 or RAW. And once you select RAW, by default it'll be on 6K, and you can choose the frame rates here, and you can choose either to shoot RAW as well as light RAW. But obviously we're going to shoot RAW all the way. That's because that's the purpose of testing this camera. Okay, so for the 6K RAW, obviously we are already shooting in RAW, so why not just go ahead and let's go ahead and turn on the C-Log 3 so we can get the most out of it. So under the menu system, you can go to the fourth tab and then you can select Canon log settings. And I'm just going to turn it on. And I'm going to turn the view assist on. So what this view assist does is that if you have it on, it just throws on a Rec 709 LUT over your RAW file, RAW image when you're shooting, so that you can clearly see everything as if you were shooting on a standard color profile. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm just going to try and shoot a simple clip and show you guys what the RAW file looks like. Alright, looking at it right now, looks really clean. The highlights as well as the shadows are really balanced, and that's the purpose of really shooting RAW, so that you have a really flat dynamic range, so which gives you a lot more flexibility to push the colors as well as the contrast in post. Okay, so for this segment, we're going to be doing something very fun for you guys to do at home wherever you're watching the video around the world. So I do have the Canon 5D Mark IV, which I personally own, and the R3 here. We're going to do a dual camera shootout. So Canon did mention the R3, 24.1 megapixels, is in terms of resolution, it should do better than a 30 megapixel 5D Mark IV. So on paper, 24 megapixels, that's not supposed to be better than 30 megapixels, but because of what Canon said, I wanted to do this little activity myself and test them and put these two cameras to the test to see if what Canon says is really true. So in order to make this test fair, I will be using the same lens throughout the whole test, as well as a tripod to make sure that the frames are almost identical. So you guys back at home will put these shots side by side. Let me know which one do you think belongs to the R3, the A or the B. So yes, I'm going to be also using the exact same camera setting. So let's jump straight into it and test out to see if 24 megapixel from the R3 is actually better than the 30 on the R5D Mark IV. Okay, so in closing, I guess this is a very fun camera to use as well as its versatility, but that being said, it is not a camera for beginners, and I emphasize that because this camera alone for its body, it'll cost you $8,749, which is not cheap by any means. But if you're doing a lot of event photography or wedding photography as well as sports or vehicle photography, this is a camera that I highly recommend because of its quick autofocus as well as its accuracy, and obviously 30 shots per second. And even for people that want to do videos occasionally, having this the ability to shoot 6K 12-bit RAW is something that if I had in my arsenal, I would definitely want to. But unfortunately for me, after I return this camera, I'm gonna have to go back to my 5D Mark IV. And I was just joking with Kai Hong that while I was shooting on the R3 as well as the 5D Mark IV, I feel so much of a difference in terms of the camera, so I would definitely have to consider trying to upgrade my 5D Mark IV. But enough about that, we're talking about the R3, and I guess you guys know my personal opinions about the camera so far. I just want you guys to keep in mind that this video is not sponsored by Canon by any means, so I'm sharing only my truest and most honest opinions. But that will do it for now. I hope you guys found this video interesting, and if you have any questions, you can always leave them down in the comment section below. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this Ryan Mamba's perspective, and I'll see you guys in the next one.